The Three-Cornered World was written in 1906, but its action, if one can use that term with regard to so static a work, is set 2 years earlier, at the time of the Russo-Japanese War. The war plays no direct part in the novel, at least not until the last few pages, but at that point its rather jarring denouement has an uncanny similarity to the World War I motif, which brings to a close another great Alpine novel, The Magic Mountain by Thomas Mann. The Three-Cornered World is, among other things, about meditation versus action, detachment versus duty, about Western versus Eastern value systems, about the perceived perils of modernism. In my opinion, it's one of the greatest novels of the 20th century, and I'm going to read just a few excerpts from its first chapter. Going up a mountain track, I fell to thinking. Approach everything rationally and you become harsh. Pull along in the stream of emotions and you will be swept away by the current. Give free rein to your desires and you become uncomfortably confined. It is not a very agreeable place to live, this world of ours. When the unpleasantness increases, you want to draw yourself up to some place where life is easier. It is just at the point when you first realize that life will be no more agreeable, no matter what heights you may attain, that a poem may be given birth or a picture created. I would go farther and say that it is not even necessary to make this vision a reality. Merely conjure up the image before your eyes, and poetry will burst into life, and songs pour forth, and the whole range of colors will of their own accord and in all their brilliance imprint themselves on your mind's eye, though your canvas stands on its easel as yet untouched by the brush. It is enough that you are able to take this view of life and see this decadent, sullied, vulgar world, purified and beautiful in the camera of your innermost soul. Even the poet whose thoughts have never found expression in a single verse, or the painter who possesses no colors and has never painted so much as a single square foot of canvas, can obtain salvation and be delivered from earthly desires and passions. After 20 years of life, I realized that this is a world worth living in. At 25, I saw that just as light and darkness are but opposite sides of the same thing, so wherever the sunlight falls, it must of necessity cast a shadow. Today, at 30, my thoughts are these. In the depths of joy dwells sorrow, and the greater the happiness, the greater the pain. Try to tear joy and sorrow apart, and you lose your hold on life. Try to cast them to one side, and the world crumbles. Money is important, but be that as it may, when it accumulates, does it not become a worry which attacks you, even in sleep? Love is a delight, yet should the delights of love piling one upon another begin to bear down on you, then you will yearn for those days long before you knew them. It was just as my meandering thoughts reached this point that my right foot came down suddenly on the edge of a loose, angular rock, and I slipped. To compensate for my left foot, which I had hastily shot out in an effort to keep my balance, the rest of me dropped. Fortunately, I came down on a boulder about 3 feet across, and luckily no damage was done. As I rose and looked round me, I noticed away off to the left of the track a towering peak shaped like an inverted bucket. Immediately below me, a lark burst suddenly into song. But gaze down into the valley as I would, I could see no sign of the bird. I could hear his voice clearly, but that was all. The ceaseless attack and vigor of his song made me feel that this vast, limitless body of air was dashing backwards and forwards in a frantic effort to escape the unbearable irritation of 1,000 flea bites. That bird really did not stop even for an instant. It seemed that he would not be satisfied unless he could sing his heart out, incessantly, day and night, throughout that idyllic springtime. Not only sing, but go on climbing, up and up, forever. There was no doubt but that was where the lark would die, up there among the clouds. Perhaps at the peak of his long climb he would glide in among the drifting clouds and there be lost forever. with only his voice remaining, shrouded by the air. In spring, everything becomes drowsy. The cat forgets to chase the mouse. Men forget that they have debts. Sometimes they even forget how to locate their own souls and fall into a stupor. When, however, I gazed far out over that sea of rape blossoms, I came to my senses. And when I heard the song of the lark, the mist cleared, and I found my soul again. Oh, this is real happiness, when you think thus and reach such a pitch of happiness. That is poetry. In order to appreciate the poetry, you must put yourself in the position of an onlooker, who, being able to stand well back, can really see what is happening. It is only from this position that a play or a novel can be enjoyed. You are only a poet while you are watching or reading and are not actually involved. Having said this, however, I must admit that most plays and novels are so full of suffering, anger, quarreling, and crying that even the onlooker cannot keep emotion at arm's length. He finds himself at some point or other drawn in, and in his turn suffers, gets annoyed, feels quarrelsome, and cries. After 30 years of life in this world of ours, I have had more than enough of the suffering, anger, belligerence, and sadness which are ever present. And I find it very trying to be subjected to repeated doses of stimulants designed to evoke these emotions when I go to the theater or read a novel. I want a poem which abandons the commonplace and lifts me at least for a short time above the dust and grime of the workaday world, not one which arouses my passions to an even greater pitch than usual. Western poets in particular take human nature as their cornerstone and are oblivious to the existence of the realm of pure poetry. And consequently, when they reach its borders, they come to a halt because they're unaware that anything lies beyond. They're content to deal merely in such commodities as sympathy, love, justice, freedom, all of which may be found in that transient bazaar which we call life. No wonder Shelley heaved a sigh when he heard the song of the lark. Happily, Oriental poets have on occasion gained sufficient insight to enable them to enter the realm of pure poetry. Beneath the eastern hedge I choose a chrysanthemum, and my gaze wanders slowly to the southern hills. Only 2 lines, but reading them, one is sharply aware of how completely the poet has succeeded in breaking free from this stifling world. There is no girl next door peeping over the fence, nor is there a dear friend living far away across the hills. He's above such things. Within the space of those lines, a whole new world has been created. It's like falling into a sound sleep and escaping from the wearying round of steamers, trains, rights, duties, etiquette. I'm not really a poet by profession, so it's not my intention to preach to modern society in the hope of obtaining converts, but this is the sole reason why, in spring, I trudge all alone along mountain tracks with my color box and tripod slung from my shoulder. I long to absorb straight from nature some of that atmosphere, and, if only for a brief period, to wander at will through a land which is completely detached from feelings and emotions. This is a peculiarity of mine. Of course, I'm only human, therefore, however dear to me this sublime detachment from the world may be, there is a limit to how much of it I can stand at any one time. However much I may be enthralled by the lark and the rape blossoms, I'm still mortal enough to have no desire to camp out in the middle of the mountains, and I'm crossing this mountain in the hope of being able to spend the night in an inn at the hot spring resort of Nekoi. I wonder how it would be if, while I'm on this short journey, I were to regard events as though they were part of the action of a no play, and the people I meet merely as if they were actors. Since this trip is concerned fundamentally with poetry, I should like to take the opportunity of getting near to the no atmosphere by curbing my emotions as much as possible, even though I know I cannot disregard them entirely. I should like to view people from the same standpoint as I view the world of pure poetry. Basho found even the sight of a horse urinating near his pillow elegant enough to write a haiku about. I, too, from now on, will regard everyone I meet, farmer, tradesman, village clerk, old man, old woman alike, as no more than a component feature of the overall canvas of nature. I know they're different from figures in a painting, since each one, I suppose, will act and behave as he or she sees fit, but it will not trouble me, for I shall just think of them as moving about in a picture. And figures in a picture, however much they may move, are confined within 2 dimensions. If, of course, you allow yourself to think that they're projected into the 3rd dimension, then complications arise, for you will find them jostling you, and once again you will be forced to consider your clash of interests. It was just as I'd come to this conclusion that I glanced up and saw that the sky looked threatening. I felt as though the uncertain clouds were weighing down right on top of me. Suddenly, however, almost without my noticing, they spread out, turning the whole sky as far as I could see into a rolling, awe-inspiring sea of cloud, from which there began to fall a steady drizzle of spring rain. From time to time, a gust of wind would part the high curtain of cloud, revealing off to the right a dark gray ridge of mountain. Immediately to my left, I could see the foot of another mountain, and at times, within the filmy depths of haze, shadowy shapes of what might have been pine trees showed themselves, only to hide again in an instant. Whether it was the rain or the trees that moved, or whether the whole thing was merely the unreal wavering of a dream, I did not know. Whatever it was, it struck me as most unusual and wonderful. The rain was just beginning to fall in drops from my hat when, about 10 or 12 yards ahead, I heard the jingling of small bells, and from out of the blackness the shape of a pack-horse driver materialized. "I suppose you don't happen to know anywhere to stay around here, do you?" "Oh, there's a tea house just over a mile up the road." "You got pretty wet, haven't you?" Still another mile to go. The raindrops, which had before been like chaff flying in the wind, were now getting larger and longer, and I was able to see each separate shaft clearly. My coat was saturated, and the rain water, which had soaked right through to my underclothes, had become tepid with the heat of my body. I felt really wretched, and so, pulling my hat resolutely down over one eye, I set off at a brisk pace. When I think of it as happening to somebody else, it seems that the idea of me soaked to the skin, surrounded by countless driving streaks of silver, and moving through a vast grey expanse, would make an admirable poem. Only when I completely forget my material existence and view myself from a purely objective standpoint can I, as a figure in a painting, blend into the beautiful harmony of my natural surroundings. At the moment, however, I feel annoyed because of the rain, or miserable because my legs are weary with walking. Then I have already ceased to be a character in a poem or a figure in a painting, and I revert to the uncomprehending, insensitive man in the street I was before. I am then even blind to the elegance of the fleeting clouds, unable even to feel any bond of sympathy with a falling petal or the cry of a bird, much less appreciate the great beauty in the image of myself, completely alone, walking through the mountains in spring.